Hello! Welcome to the next lesson. If you have not started this series yet, please go back and start with Book 1, Lesson 1. At any rate, I'll never go there again, said Alice as she picked her way through the wood. It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life. This is a reminder. Remember just translates to justo. This is a reminder. Remember right translates to derecho. Justo, as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading derecho into it. That's very curious, she thought. But everything's curious today. I think I may as well go in at once. And in she went. Once more she found Ella Misma in the long hall and close to the little glass table. Now, I'll manage better this time, she said to Ella Misma, and began by taking the little golden key and unlocking the door that led into the garden. Then she went to work nibbling at the mushroom. She had kept a piece of it in her pocket till she was about a foot high. Then she walked down the little passage, and then she found Ella Misma at last in the beautiful garden, among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. Chapter 8. The Queen's Croquet Ground. This is a reminder. Remember 3 translates to tres. This is a reminder. Remember just translates to justo. This is a reminder. Remember heard translates to escucho. This is a reminder. Remember say translates to decir. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were trace gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Alice thought this a very curious thing, and she went nearer to watch them. And just as she came up to them, she escuchó one of them desire, "Look out now, Five, don't go splashing paint over me like that." "I couldn't help it," said Five in a sulky tone. 7 jogged my elbow. This is a reminder. Remember right translates to derecho, on which 7 looked up and said, "That's derecho, 5, always lay the blame on others." This is a reminder. Remember say translates to decir. This is a reminder. Remember heard translates to escucho. "You'd better not talk," said 5. "I escucho the Queen decir only yesterday you deserve to be beheaded." "What for?" said the one who had spoken first. "That's none of your business, too," said 7. This is a reminder. Remember tell translates to decir. "Yes, it is his business," said 5, "and I'll decir him. It was for bringing the cooked tulip roots instead of onions." This is a reminder. Remember just translates to justo. 7 flung down his brush and had justo begun, "Well, of all the unjust things," when his eye chanced to fall upon Alice, as she stood watching them, and he checked himself suddenly. The others looked round also, and all of them bowed low. This is a reminder. Remember tell translates to decir. "Would you decir me," said Alice a little timidly, "why you are painting those roses?" In the next paragraph, we are introducing a new word. The word voice translates to voz. This is a reminder. Remember find translates to encontrar. This is a reminder. Remember 3 translates to tres. 5 and 7 said nada but looked at 2. 2 began in a low voz, "Why, the fact is, you see, miss, this here ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put a white one in by mistake. And if the Queen was to encontrar it out, we should all have our heads cut off, you know. So you see, miss, we're doing our best afore she comes to." At this moment 5, who had been anxiously looking across the garden, called out, "The Queen, the Queen!" and the tres gardeners instantly threw themselves flat upon their faces. There was a sound of many footsteps, and Alice looked round, eager to see the Queen. This is a reminder. Remember 3 translates to tres. This is a reminder. Remember next translates to próximo. This is a reminder. Remember without translates to sin. First came 10 soldiers carrying clubs. These were all shaped like the tres gardeners, oblong and flat, with their hands and feet at the corners. Próximo, the 10 courtiers. These were ornamented all over with diamonds, and walked 2 and 2, as the soldiers did. After these came the royal children. There were 10 of them, and the little dears came jumping merrily along hand in hand in couples. They were all ornamented with hearts. Próximo came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognized the white rabbit. It was talking in a hurried, nervous manner, smiling at everything that was said, and went by Sin noticing her. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion, and last of all this grand procession came the King and Queen of Hearts. This is a reminder. Remember 3 translates to tres. This is a reminder. Remember heard translates to escucho. This is a reminder. Remember such translates to tal. Alice was rather doubtful whether she ought not to lie down on her face like the tres gardeners, but she could not remember ever having a scucho of tal a rule at processions. And besides, what would be the use of a procession, thought she, if people had all to lie down upon their faces so that they couldn't see it? So she stood still where she was and waited. When the procession came opposite to Alice, they all stopped and looked at her, and the Queen said severely, "Who is this?" She said it to the Knave of Hearts, who only bowed and smiled in reply. "Idiot," said the Queen, tossing her head impatiently, and turning to Alice she went on, "What's your name, child?" "My name is Alice, so please your Majesty," said Alice very politely, but she added to Ella Misma, "Why, they're only a pack of cards after all. I needn't be afraid of them. This is a reminder. Remember 3 translates to Tress. This is a reminder. Remember Tel translates to Desir." "And who are these?" said the Queen, pointing to the Tress gardeners who were lying round the rose tree. For you see, as they were lying on their faces, and the pattern on their backs was the same as the rest of the pack, she could not decide whether they were gardeners, or soldiers, or courtiers, or trusts of her own children. "How should I know?" said Alice, surprised at her own courage. "It's no business of mine." The Queen turned crimson with fury, and after glaring at her for a moment like a wild beast, screamed, "Off with her head! Off!" "Nonsense," said Alice, very loudly and decidedly, and the Queen was silent. The King laid his hand upon her arm and timidly said, "Consider, my dear, she is only a child." The Queen turned angrily away from him and said to the Knave, "Turn them over." The Knave did so, very carefully, with one foot. "This is a reminder. Remember voice translates to voz. This is a reminder. Remember 3 translates to Tress." "Get up," said the Queen in a shrill, loud voz, and the Tress gardeners instantly jumped up and began bowing to the King, the Queen, the royal children, and everybody else. "This is a reminder. Remember make translates to Hacer." "Leave off that," screamed the Queen. "You hacer me giddy." And then, turning to the rose tree, she went on, "What have you been doing here?" "May it please your Majesty," said Tu, in a very humble tone, going down on one knee as he spoke, "we were trying This is a reminder. Remember 3 translates to Tress." "I see," said the Queen, who had meanwhile been examining the roses. "Off with their heads," and the procession moved on, Tress of the soldiers remaining behind to execute the unfortunate gardeners, who ran to Alice for protection. "This is a reminder. Remember 3 translates to Tress." "You shan't be beheaded," said Alice, and she put them into a large flower pot that stood near. The Tress soldiers wandered about for a minute or 2, looking for them, and then quietly marched off after the others. "Are their heads off?" shouted the Queen. "Their heads are gone, if it please your Majesty," the soldiers shouted in reply. "That's right," shouted the Queen. "Can you play croquet?" The soldiers were silent and looked at Alice, as the question was evidently meant for her. "Yes," shouted Alice. "This is a reminder. Remember much translates to mucho. This is a reminder. Remember next translates to proximo." "Come on then," roared the Queen, and Alice joined the procession, wondering very mucho what would happen proximo. "This is a reminder. Remember voice translates to voz." It's a very fine day," said a timid voz at her side. She was walking by the White Rabbit, who was peeping anxiously into her face. "Very," said Alice. "Where's the Duchess?" "Hush, hush," said the Rabbit in a low, hurried tone. He looked anxiously over his shoulder as he spoke, and then raised himself upon tiptoe, put his mouth close to her ear, and whispered, "She's under sentence of execution." "What for?" said Alice. "This is a reminder. Remember say translates to Desir." "Did you desir? What a pity?" the Rabbit asked. "No, I didn't," said Alice. "I don't think it's at all a pity. I said what for." "She boxed the Queen's ears," the Rabbit began. Alice gave a little scream of laughter. "Oh, hush!" the Rabbit whispered in a frightened tone. "The Queen will hear you. You see, she came rather late, and the Queen said, 'This is a reminder. Remember voice translates to voz. This is a reminder. Remember God translates to consigio. This is a reminder. Remember such translates to tal. This is a reminder. Remember make translates to hacer.' 'Get to your places!' shouted the Queen in a voz of thunder, and people began running about in all directions, tumbling up against each other. However, they consigio settled down in a minute or 2, and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen tal a curious croquet ground in her life. It was all ridges and furrows. The balls were live hedgehogs, the mallets live flamingos, and the soldiers had to double themselves up and to stand on their hands and feet to hasten the arches. This is a reminder. Remember got translates to consiglio. This is a reminder. Remember such translates to tal. This is a reminder. Remember find translates to encontrar. The chief difficulty Alice found at first was in managing her flamingo. She succeeded in getting its body tucked away comfortably enough under her arm, with its legs hanging down. But generally, justo as she had consiglio its neck nicely straightened out and was going to give the hedgehog a blow with its head, it would twist itself round and look up in her face with till a puzzled expression that she could not help bursting out laughing. And when she had consiglio its head down and was going to begin again, it was very provoking to encontrar that the hedgehog had unrolled itself and was in the act of crawling away. Besides all this, there was generally a ridge or furrow in the way wherever she wanted to send the hedgehog to, and as the doubled-up soldiers were always getting up and walking off to other parts of the ground, Alice pronto came to the conclusion that it was a very difficult game indeed. This is a reminder. Remember without translates to sin. The players all played at once sin, waiting for turns, quarrelling all the while, and fighting for the hedgehogs, and in a very short time the queen was in a furious passion and went stamping about and shouting, "Off with his head," or "Off with her head," about once in a minute. Alice began to feel very uneasy. To be sure, she had not as yet had any dispute with the queen, but she knew that it might happen any minute. And then, thought she, what would become of me? They're dreadfully fond of beheading people here. The great wonder is that there's anyone left alive. This is a reminder. Remember without translates to sin. This is a reminder. Remember much translates to mucho. She was looking about for some way of escape and wondering whether she could get away sin being seen, when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It puzzled her very mucho at first, but after watching it a minute or two, she made it out to be a grin, and she said to ella misma, "It's the Cheshire Cat. Now I shall have somebody to talk to." "How are you getting on?" said the cat, as pronto as there was mouth enough for it to speak with. Alice waited till the eyes appeared and then nodded. It's no use speaking to it, she thought, till its ears have come, or at least one of them. In another minute the whole head appeared, and then Alice put down her flamingo and began an account of the game, feeling very glad she had someone to listen to her. The cat seemed to think that there was enough of it now in sight, and no more of it appeared. This is a reminder. Remember next translates to proximo. This is a reminder. Remember got translates to consiglio. "I don't think they play at all fairly," Alice began, in rather a complaining tone, "and they all quarrel so dreadfully one can't hear oneself speak, and they don't seem to have any rules in particular. At least, if there are, nobody attends to them, and you've no idea how confusing it is, all the things being alive. For instance, there's the arch I've consiglio to go through proximo walking about at the other end of the ground. And I should have croqueted the queen's hedgehog justo now, only it ran away when it saw mine coming. This is a reminder. Remember voice translates to voz. "How do you like the queen?" said the cat in a low voz. "Not at all," said Alice. "She's so extremely—" Justo then, she noticed that the queen was close behind her, listening, so she went on, "Likely to win, that it's hardly worthwhile finishing the game." The queen smiled and passed on. "Who are you talking to?" said the king, going up to Alice and looking at the cat's head with great curiosity. "It's a friend of mine, a Cheshire Cat," said Alice. "Allow me to introduce it." "I don't like the look of it at all," said the king. "However, it may kiss my hand if it likes." "I'd rather not," the cat remarked. "This is a reminder. Remember got translates to consiglio." "Don't be impertinent," said the king, "and don't look at me like that." He consiglio behind Alice as he spoke. "A cat may look at a king," said Alice. "I've read that in some book, but I don't remember where." "Well, it must be removed," said the king very decidedly, and he called the queen, who was passing at the moment. "My dear, I wish you would have this cat removed." This is a reminder. Remember without translates to sin. The queen had only one way of settling all difficulties, great or small. "Off with his head," she said, sin even looking round. "I'll fetch the executioner myself," said the king eagerly, and he hurried off. This is a reminder. Remember voice translates to voz. This is a reminder. Remember heard translates to escuchó. This is a reminder. Remember three translates to tres. This is a reminder. Remember such translates to tal. Alice thought she might as well go back and see how the game was going on, as she escuchó the queen's voz in the distance, screaming with passion. She had already escuchó her sentence tres of the players to be executed for having missed their turns, and she did not like the look of things at all, as the game was in tal confusion that she never knew whether it was her turn or not. So she went in search of her hedgehog. The hedgehog was engaged in a fight with another hedgehog, which seemed to Alice an excellent opportunity for croqueting one of them with the other. The only difficulty was that her flamingo was gone across to the other side of the garden, where Alice could see it trying in a helpless sort of way to fly up into a tree. By the time she had caught the flamingo and brought it back, the fight was over, and both the hedgehogs were out of sight. But it doesn't matter much, thought Alice, as all the arches are gone from this side of the ground. So she tucked it away under her arm, that it might not escape again, and went back for a little more conversation with her friend. This is a reminder. Remember got translates to consiguió. This is a reminder. Remember find translates to encontrar.